Well, feels a little bit weird starting your week on a Thursday. Pretty sure it's Thursday. Yeah. You're never too sure until you actually check the date. Sometimes you're like, whoa, have I got the date completely wrong? I don't think I've done that once. When was it? I did it when we were catching up with a group of friends for some sporting thing, and I got the dates completely wrong. I think I went a day earlier. For some reason I had it in my head that it was Saturday instead of Sunday. But haven't done that at work. Magically, and touch wood, I have also never really slept in so much so that I've missed the start time of work. I've definitely slept in and then had to race out the door. There was a couple times where I think it was I don't know, you might just have a bad sleep or something, and then you just go you go back to sleep, and then either you turn off the alarm or you just end up sleeping through the alarm. But when I next wake up, it's just at the time where I can leave, within 5 minutes of that. So I think I remember there was one time where let's try to get this window. Yeah, good. There was one time where I think I had really bad sleep. I was waking up at 3 or 4, went back to sleep, ended up waking up at 7. We start at 7:30, and I think I just got there 7:35. I was just 5 minutes late, but I was no shower, nothing. I just went straight out the door. Anyways, we're back on the second week of nights, so this will be night number 8, and yeah, we'll do this week, have another week off, and then do one more week after that. So keeping vibes high, keeping the momentum going. It's easy to get stuck in a bit of a rut in your night shift period or night shift block, but I think having a good week off is critical to that recovery. So I feel really well rested, and you just gotta, whatever it is in your week on, but you gotta get through it. But make sure you take some time off and enjoy your week down. I think one of the main things that we should touch on is study and different study techniques, study tips, how you essentially study in medical school. And maybe I can reflect a little bit about how my studies sort of transitioned over the years. There isn't one right way to study. Yeah, there isn't a magic bullet or something that you can just use and it'll always make your study awesome and super useful, super bang for your buck, super efficient. You just have to grind it out and you get better over time. I think that's the thing for most things, a lot of hard work, a lot of time spent, and then you look back and you think, oh, it's just, you can distill it down to these, few principles, or you find that it actually makes a bit more sense. But at the end of the day, you got to put in the time and hours and effort to actually try to learn it as best as you can. So at the core of it, you got to go to your lectures, you got to watch the videos, you got to read the material before your lecture, you got to make some sort of notes in your own way, you got to do the practice questions. I think how I studied, though, it definitely changed throughout the years. At the start, I was writing notes by hand, on paper, and storing those notes in a book or some sort of folder or something like that. I even made posters at one point. We had this I think towards the end of my undergraduate degree, we had this subject where we focused on a few different diseases like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease, maybe a couple others, but I ended up making like a couple of posters for them, and the posters were like, oh, they were good. I had like good diagrams, I had good layout and everything, but in terms of how much I remember, like, I don't know, I think you put so much effort into making the content, but not actually remembering or understanding what it is. And of course, yeah, there's like spaced repetition. Like, I haven't revised that poster since I last did it. But I think, I mean, at the end of the day, teaching is the best form of revision. And I'll say that right off the bat before we go in how I've actually transitioned, because I think the only way I think study is useful is if I actually teach someone something. I think back to, my maths tutoring days. So I did okay at school for maths, and ended up tutoring it for about 8 years or so, 7 or 8 years. And it was like really good. Like, I really enjoyed it. It was good fun. I think I could probably do maths tutoring again, even after like a 3-year break, because I've done, 8 years of it, and I've really like honed my skills, my knowledge. I've been teaching people about it for 8 years. And I think like when you teach someone, like when you teach someone something, you don't forget it, you don't forget it as quickly as anything. I think it's the ultimate form of like solidifying your knowledge, because when you teach someone something, you have to distill it down and be able to, you got to distill it down to a level that that person understands, and you have to be able to move that concept around metaphorically, so that that person understands it from their point of view. So, for instance, like you can, explain a concept that is really quite complex if you get into the nitty gritty, but at the outset be able to distill it down to something as simple as, like a simple 2D image that's able to be understood by like a 10-year-old at the base level. And yeah, you can layer stuff on like that. And if you can understand it at the most simple concept, then you can layer on more complexities bit by bit. And I think, to be honest, that's what maths is. When you learn maths, you learn it very simply, at primary school level. You don't really do that much, like you're just adding numbers, you're subtracting them, and then you come back the next year, you're doing like multiplication, you're doing division. You come back the year after, you're doing fractions, and you're like layering on this thing, but whilst also maintaining the base like functions that you learned the year before. So I don't know, I always got told this thing like, if you read something, you remember about 60% of it. If you write that stuff down like off by heart, you remember about 85% of it. And if you teach someone that concept, you remember 95% of what you've taught them. And I can't, like, since I heard that probably like 10, 15 years ago, I can't remember, it was a long time ago, I don't think I have found something yet to challenge that or to prove it wrong. And I think that's a real like test to like how valuable teaching is in terms of a revision aspect. So, I mean, obviously you can't teach everyone. You can handwrite stuff, and you can, like what I used to do in terms of like revising stuff, I would often have a question or some sort of prompt on a piece of paper, and then I would have next to it a blank piece of paper, and sort of write that stuff down and write down as best I could the answer to the question that I had. And that was actually super, super useful. Like, you would get a prompt saying, describe the anatomy of like the celiac trunk or something like that. you may include a diagram for like to help you illustrate this. And you could, start drawing your diagram. You could describe the, branches and then their subsequent branches. You could describe the course of each branch and what it supplies. Like, there are so many different nuances that you could go for a question like that. And you could really go into a lot of different nuances for a question like that. So that, in a sense, is pretty good. And I guess you're practicing writing stuff down as much as you are trying to explain it. And I think there's pros and cons to that. Like, the pro is that, exams are usually written, or essentially on paper, whether it be an electronic version of that and you have to type something, or you have to select like an answer from like a multi-choice question. Doing stuff on paper is not a bad idea at all. The downside is, I think the downside of it is that you actually end up like just spilling out a lot of general information and not trying to distill it enough. And I think that problem is alleviated when you actually try to talk to someone, because when you talk to someone, you can't just explain stuff by listing out, you can't just start drawing something on paper and then like midway through that go and start writing down dot points about what the branches of the celiac trunk are, and then go back to drawing and then say a couple random sentences here and there. Like, you're more fluid and you're more like logical when you explain a concept to someone, because you have to actually talk to them like a normal person. If you say, how's your day? You can't just say, I like fish and chips, or like, yeah, AFL's my favorite sport. You can't just say like random stuff that don't align to the question that you were asked. You have to specifically answer the question. So if you had a question that said, what are the branches of the celiac trunk? You have to say, the branches of the celiac trunk are. Then you've answered the question. Then they say, could you tell me the course of the splenic artery? Or could you describe the course of the splenic artery for me? And then you say, well, the splenic artery branches off X and then goes along this course, gives off a branch here and there. And then in your mind, you're like visualizing the picture that you've previously drawn or previously seen, and then describing that to the person. And you could also assist them by, talking to a picture or drawing them a picture after. But asking someone a question and then giving them a response, I think, is the best way to do that. And to an extent, I think that's why flashcards work, or that's why QBanks work, because it's very much question and answer. The trap is that with QBanks, you might not think, it's not as active as you might think, So like what I like to do is I use this program Quizlet, which I think I just preferred it to Anki, just because of an aesthetic point of view. What I would do is I would essentially have the questions, create my flashcards or create my Q&A like pairings. Then I would go on the section where it would say write in order to revise, and the question would come up on the flashcard as a prompt, and then you would be prompted to write it out or like type it out. And I think that was better because you're actually forced to specifically type out the response. You're not, with a flashcard, you're like, you can sort of mumble like the answer, you can say like a roundabout way of it, but at times I think you give yourself more credit than you're due, and you might think you understand something, but the flashcard says something different, or you're like, it's good enough, That's why I don't like flashcards. There's no accountability to it. Like, if you type out the answer in like for the program I use, like Quizlet, and you didn't get it right, then it would say you got it wrong. And then you have to redo it at a later point. And I really like that spaced repetition of it. So it forced you to get it right before you could move on. I think the downside of flashcards and QBanks is just making them. There's already like a lot out there, but you know, whether it's specific to your actual level is a different question. So that's the main downside of it. Sure, you might be able to go into all this detail about, you know, the anatomical course of the splenic artery, but you just need to know for your exam that it's a branch of the celiac trunk, you know. So how much time do you have? You know, you could spend 24/7 learning medicine. It's not like, oh, I will eventually learn it later in the year. You might not, you know. You might only be tested on a certain aspect of it and then not have to really cover that aspect later on in your medical career. Man, it's so dark out here. I need to bring a light for this camera because it's coming into winter. I mean, like 2 weeks ago, we were driving in and it was like still lights on, you know. It was still good. You could actually, it's nice like evening, summer night. Before you know it, we're gonna be driving in, it's gonna be pitch black. Oh well. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Like, you should actually try to think about how well your revision technique gets you to the desired outcome. The desired outcome is for you to actually understand the concept. So, and a good test of understanding a concept is being able to explain it to someone. So it's why I really like, I mean, although it's kind of, you feel like you don't know anything, probably because you don't know that much, actually, is when you're put under pressure by a senior colleague they ask you a question, or they might like, what do they call it? Haze. Is it haze? Like slowing down to like 40 just to merge. Crazy. Yeah, like they haze you, you know, where they like ask you a question and then you try to answer, then they ask you more questions, then you try to answer again. Oh, I thought I left my phone behind, and I was like, that is the one thing that like I need for this shift. So like they haze you, and I actually don't mind it. I mean, different people, like obviously there's like different like levels of like hazing is what they call it, and some are like have good intentions and some don't have good intentions, but yeah, I never minded it because I thought that really forced me to think about my answer and simplify it down to the actual things that the senior colleagues remember, and those are the things that actually get tested on, and those are the things that actually dictate your clinical practice. So if you can remember that, then you'll be fine. And that's that key concept sort of level of understanding that you want. So yeah, I would try to teach people and explain people. And the best thing is, like, one thing that I never thought of up until pretty recently is that you don't have to be an expert to try to teach someone. Like, teaching or like having like some session or something where you're forced to teach someone a concept. I remember I used to do these like peer tutoring sessions when I was at university, and you just teach like a couple years below some students. You take them for a tutorial and you teach them about a certain concept and go through questions and whatnot, and you only have to know a little bit more than they know for it to be beneficial to you. And I mean, so you're not like running a whole 300 person lecture theatre, you're just running like a small tutorial of like 10 or 12 people, and you get to like simply like explain stuff to them the best way you can, and answer their questions as best you can. They're not expecting you to be an expert, you're not expected to be an expert. It puts you under enough pressure to force you to think about things and do some revision, because I don't know, by nature I don't want to appear like I don't know anything, or I don't want to not do any work and just wing it for those sorts of sessions. I want to like sort of like be the best teacher I can be. So that's like inherent like within me. So if I'm like, if someone says, hey, you've got to do like a presentation, or hey, you've got to do like a tutorial, then you're like, well, I'm going to make it a pretty good tutorial, like, or at least try to be. I'm going to try to explain the most pertinent bits of information and show these people that it's actually like how you can actually understand these certain concepts. So you have to revise, you have to simplify and distill, and then you have to explain. And all of that is just amazing layering for like revision and revising concepts. So yeah, I think all of that stuff is unbelievably helpful. How can you do that if you don't have people to teach or people to explain? Well, one of my best mates used to do this thing that I thought was ridiculous, but I mean, it actually works like so much. Like, he didn't have like these tutorial sessions, or didn't have like other people to explain stuff to or whatever. And there's only so much you can explain to family members before they're like, stop talking to me. And they don't really want to listen to all this like detailed stuff. But what he did is he printed out a picture of like this dog on his, and it was just like an A4 piece of paper, just like with a dog face on it. And he put it on his door, like on the back of a door or bathroom door or something, I can't remember. And he essentially would explain concepts to the dog and teach the dog. So he created his own student who he could teach and explain stuff to. And it's a bit like, well, that's unreal. Like, that's a really good way to actually make up like your own like student, your own class to teach. And you're not relying on these opportunities. You're actually just being creative and thinking, well, I don't have anyone to explain stuff to. Why don't I make up a person and explain it to them? Sure, they can't talk back. I mean, unless his dog came alive with some sort of Harry Potter spell. But you can actually really go into a heap of detail and a heap of depth just through that simple thing. One thing that I sort of like the idea of is making videos, just from like, I don't mind that as a concept. And sure, there's already videos out there, but there's not videos specific to your lectures and your tutorials and the cases that you might do. And maybe they're not explaining stuff the way you would like them to be explained. I really like this guy, I think he's a US guy on YouTube, he has a channel, Dirty USMLE, and very like, you know, not like low production value, but I guess they're not hyper edited, they're not like, you don't see his face ever. He does these like tutorials on concepts for USMLE and just explains them in a way that he understands, that makes sense to him, and thinks that other people might understand too. And I think it's just a really good way of looking at things. Like, you don't have to really go into like that much detail with, well, sorry, let me just retract that. I mean not go into detail. He doesn't have to make it like this big high production thing. You simply go through concepts, get the crux of it, get relatable things in there, and explain things in a way that is actually easy to understand for people in the same boat. And even with not that much knowledge of that topic, like, just distills it really, really well. And I mean, not everyone's gonna start a YouTube channel and start making those videos like that, but yeah, printing off a picture of a dog and talking to it, making your own flashcards if you can be bothered doing that, but then the onus is revising them. I think that's another good way of studying and revising. Teaching someone through video or tutorials is excellent. I used to do anatomy demonstrating, so essentially I would take classes of like science or biomed students, can't remember, in their second or third year, and I was in med school at the time, and essentially what I would do is I would run like a little workshop for a specific area of the body that we were working on, and I would just explain stuff, ask them questions, go through different concepts. There might have been like the forearm. I would have like quizzed them on like, hey, what are the layers of the forearm? You know, what's this muscle? What's its action? What's its origin? What's its insertion? Stuff like that. I mean, that sort of stuff is like, you know, unparalleled. Like, that's priceless learning revision, and I was getting paid for it. So yeah, I think that's just bonus stuff, you know, absolute bonus. But getting it down to something like, you can go into like all these, there is so much study and productivity stuff out there. I think it just needs to be simplified and not over exhausted. You can, at the end of the day, all your objective is, your only outcome is to understand the concept or material enough to do well at the exam. If you do that, amazing. The next step to really get to is, and I didn't have this thought until about third or fourth year in med school, is like, I don't just need to understand this for an exam, or I don't just need to get a good mark on the exam. I need to actually understand this concept so I can actually apply this at work. Like, this is going to be my job. So I started studying for my career and stopped studying for my exams, and that was a really big transition point, which made me ask the right questions. It made me focus on the right things, and I guess changed your mentality when it came to studying. I would probe for things that I felt like were important, or people told me were important to know and recognize and understand, and would probe less for things that I didn't think were that relevant or weren't exaggerated in lectures. Is it a minor stat that sort of like, you know, you could get right or you could get wrong, or was it an important concept that really was the mechanism of action of a few different drugs, and you actually needed to know this for clinical practice, because it would change how you would think about problems and how you would improve patient care. I guess there's lots of stuff out there, as I was saying, how you should study, what are your tips, what tricks do you have. I mean, at the end of the day, I've probably said that about 20 times. You know, when it comes down to it, study, you either understand or you don't. And if you don't understand it, then you need to figure out a way for you to understand it in a way that makes you not study like 20 hours a day, which I don't think is like, you know, sustainable. And you just burn out. It's like, and it's no fun. So maybe you can gamify stuff, you know, make it into like some Quizlet game where you're like matching up the right answers to the questions. Maybe you're teaching someone, maybe you're making videos, which in a way is a bit of fun. Maybe you're teaching a dog on the wall, or I know people like do like medical drawings and like illustrations, like anatomy stuff. If that's sort of your fancy, then you could do that. Whatever floats your boat, like, I don't really care. I think you just need to try to understand it in a way that is a sustainable way for you, so you're not like burning out and not like losing motivation to study, essentially. And the last thing I'd probably say is just be opportunistic. So, I mean, if you're driving to work and you have a half an hour drive to work, use that for something. Like right now, I'm using it to film like a little podcast for you guys. I'm probably pitch black right now. I'm not going to film these podcasts in the evening anymore. And this road sucks. I'm going to film this in the morning, probably on the drive home, just to keep me awake. But yeah, I would place more emphasis on being opportunistic with things and starting before you're ready. So having a go at trying to explain a concept, having a go at a practice exam before you feel fully ready. Starting messy and figuring it out later, that's the best way you can actually level up and actually get good at stuff. It's like playing a video game, you know? At the start, what do you want to do? Are you going to read the instruction manual? Are you going to watch tutorials on YouTube? Or are you just going to pick up a controller and press play? Like, I don't know. Why is this guy's light so bright? I don't know. I'm pressing play. I'm picking up that controller and I'm pressing play and just mucking around with the video game and working out how I can do it the best way I can do it. And then after that, then I start like maybe watching like tutorials. You'll be like, oh, why can't I do this skill? You know, why can't how do I actually like unlock this section of the game? Only after knowing something or trying to figure it out yourself, then can you strip back the layers and say, oh, how do I work this out? Anyways, we'll leave it there. Feel like that's probably jam-packed full of stuff. Hopefully there's a few tips in there that you can actually apply and help with your study. But yeah, until next time, I'll see you guys. Have a good one. Bye.